Good evening. We're going to call
Recording
the
in
Oceanside Planning
progress.
Commission meeting for July 11th to order. If I could get Commissioner, looks like they got the word that we're canceling our item. Before we do Pledge of Allegiance, just for those that I see leaving the chambers, item 5 under public hearings tonight is being continued until July 25th. So if you were here for that item, come back in 2 weeks. Thank you. Commissioner Dodds, would you lead us in a Pledge of Allegiance? Thank you. City Planner, can you do the roll call, please?
Certainly. Chairman Rosales.
Present.
Vice Chair Morrissey. Commissioner Balma.
Present.
Commissioner Dodds.
Present.
Commissioner Custer.
Here.
And Commissioner Simons.
Here.
The record showed that 5 of the 6 planning commissioners are present with Vice Chair Morrissey absent.
Great, thank you. Items under the agenda for communication on matters not on the agenda tonight. I don't see anything listed. I don't see anybody in the chamber. So we will assume nobody would like to present to the commission tonight. So we'll go to approval of minutes from the last meeting. That would be June 27th. I'll abstain. I was on vacation. Commissioners, any additions to those minutes or commentary?
I would make a motion to approve the minutes.
Oh, great. Thank you. A
I'll
motion by
second.
Commissioner Balma and a second by Commissioner Custer. We can use our screen, so go ahead and vote on this minutes approval. You know what? Can we do that again? I'm abstaining. I'm sorry. I went ahead and voted. Can we reboot that?
Whoops.
There we go.
Commissioners, if I could have everybody, thank you.
Sorry about that. I was floating.
Chair Rosales, let the record show that the minutes passed 3-0 with Commissioners Simons and Chairman Rosales abstaining.
Great, thank you. We have nothing listed under the consent calendar tonight, nor any items under transportation items. So we'll go to the one public hearing item for tonight, and that's consideration of a zone amendment and local coastal plan amendment to introduce an ordinance amending Article 30, Section 3032 of the Oceanside zoning ordinance. The applicant in this case is the City of Oceanside. This has to do with revising the affordable housing density bonus ordinance. Disclosures. My disclosure, I read the staff report, and I think that would be it. Commissioner Custer?
Read the staff report.
Commissioner Simons?
Read the staff report.
Commissioner Balma?
Read the staff report.
And Commissioner Dodds?
Read the staff report.
Okay, thank you. Good evening.
Good evening, Chair and Commissioners. My name is Delaney Carmen. I'm with the Planning Division, and I'll be presenting the Affordable Housing Density Bonus Update. The item before you is a request for zoning text amendments to the Affordable Housing Density Bonus Ordinance in Article 30, and to establish the amended text as part of the implementing document of the local coastal program. To provide a bit of background, our Affordable Housing Density Bonus Ordinance was last updated in 2019 and included a series of updates from state density bonus law from 2014 through 2018. Since then, a number of new bills have passed in regards to density bonus, including clarifications and new provisions. Furthermore, on January 26, 2022, City Council directed staff to add a provision to our local ordinance prohibiting short-term rentals on all units proposed as a part of density bonus projects. Therefore, staff is proposing to update the Affordable Housing Density Bonus Ordinance for the purposes of adding clarifying language and technical edits for better implementation of the ordinance, fully implementing new state density bonus law provisions as mandated by state law, as well as including council-directed language regarding short-term rental. A comprehensive list of each legislative update and their associated bills is included in the staff report for the Commission's reference. Revisions pursuant to state density bonus law include a new density bonus option for 100% affordable developments. Specifically, projects that propose 100% of their units as affordable can receive up to an 80% density bonus increase or can request a waiver for unlimited density if the project is located within a half-mile of major transit. Another revision clarifies rental requirements for all projects. Other revisions prohibit required parking ratios for specified developments and reduce parking requirements for all projects, as well as reduce the percentage of lower-income units required to qualify for incentive. Further revisions clarify how distance is measured for major transit stops, as well as increases the maximum amount of density bonus allowed up to 50% for all projects. Previously, the maximum amount of density bonus allowed for any project was capped at 35%. Further provisions grant an incentive to affordable student housing projects, as well as clarify language regarding moderate income developments and adds a forced sale requirement for units within a moderate income development. Continuing on, additional revisions prohibit a city from refusing an incentive based on a specified impact to the physical environment, although the city can still refuse an incentive based on specified impacts to public health or safety. These provisions expand the list of projects that qualify for reduced parking within a half-mile of transit, and they also include a nonprofit purchase option for affordable units. I'm so sorry, I realized I wasn't updating the slides there. So moving on, staff is also proposing a number of additional revisions to our local ordinance for cleanup and clarification purposes, which are as follows. First, references to commercial development partnership provisions have been removed. These provisions were repealed at the state level on January 1st, 2022 due to a sunset clause set forth in AB 1934. Staff has also clarified reduced parking language for consistency with state law. Land donation provisions have also been modified to match state law. Specifically, state law has more strict guidelines regarding what size qualifies for land donation and what that donation can count towards in terms of replacing affordable units, so the ordinance has been updated accordingly. Finally, staff has added language to prohibit all units proposed as a part of density bonus projects from being rented for a period of less than 31 days. The zoning text amendments are intended to update the city's affordable housing density bonus ordinance as mandated by state law. The proposed revisions will remove ambiguities and provide consistency with state density bonus provisions. Furthermore, prohibition of short-term rentals will ensure that future developments are utilizing state density bonus law with its original intent of providing affordable housing. Therefore, staff recommends the Planning Commission confirms issuance of a notice of exemption per the California Environmental Quality Act, Article 5, Section 15061B3, and adopts Planning Commission Resolution Number 2022-P20, recommending approval of Zone Amendment ZA 2201 and Local Coastal Program Amendment LCPA 2201. This concludes staff's presentation, and I will be available to answer any questions. Thank you.
I had a question. If you could go back, I think it's a slide,
Sure.
slide 2 or 3. Go back one more. It had to do with the rental language or rental.
I believe one more then.
There we
Right
go.
there.
Clarifies rent requirements for all projects.
Sure.
I don't know if I missed it in your presentation or the staff report. Can you expand on that, what that means?
Sure, let me pull up the staff report very quickly.
Yeah, if you want to just point to that, I can read it also.
So it's on page 3 of the staff report, that first full paragraph there.
Okay. Got it. Great, thank you.
Of course.
Any other questions for staff?
I have a question.
Go ahead, Commissioner Custer.
Well, the first question is this one of the requirements put on by the state that we can't refuse?
Exactly. So state density bonus law does have a requirement in 65915 that requires cities to have a local updated ordinance that reflects state law.
Whatever's in here, we have to accept.
Exactly. All these legislative updates were pursuant to those updates made at the state level.
Okay.
Ben, just on one issue, though, the council gave direction to prohibit short-term rentals of density bonus projects, and I don't think that is a state law requirement. That's a policy direction that the council gave staff to come through the process with. Other than that,
Yeah.
I just wanted to make that clear.
And what could the state do if we refused some of these?
I was thinking the same thing. I was going to pose that question to our city attorney that, well, one, if I might borrow your question.
Oh, that's fine.
Have we seen any pushback, anybody testing this, and or what are the limits of testing any of this if you're one of the cities?
So there is pending litigation involving a handful of cities testing some of these requirements, both this and the affordable, the SB 330 provisions. I think most observers believe that's a major uphill battle. Basically charter city preemption issues. So I am monitoring litigation that's pending. But in terms of what could be done, well, a developer who qualifies would be entitled to these. So if we denied it on a project level basis, then we could be sued at that level. The Attorney General could theoretically institute an action against the city as well. So there are remedies that would be available against us.
Right, pretty severe remedies,
Yeah, it
possibly.
sounds like. Well, I have a couple more questions, at least one more. So on page 3, prohibits jurisdictions from requiring parking ratios for special needs. Does that mean they can reduce the handicap spaces?
Commissioner Custer, what that means is projects that qualify for perhaps a special needs housing situation, they could provide zero parking if they wanted to, if it was under a density bonus provision. So that's what the intent of that section of 65915 is.
And so what are the special needs, like handicap, or are they?
It could be a permanent supportive housing project. It could be a homeless shelter. It could be a number of different types of specialized housing projects.
Okay, so specialized. So the housing is specialized, not the needs of the person so much, by physical, I mean. It's that the housing is specialized, made to fit a certain category
Yeah,
of
it could be
persons,
a
of
100%
needs.
senior housing project
Okay.
that qualifies for that, where they have the discretion to choose not to provide any parking on their site.
Right. Okay, thank you. There may have been one more, but I have to look for it, so.
Take your time. Any other questions for staff? Commissioner Dodd?
I do have a few questions. You can be patient with me. It's just for clarity. Can you explain how the in lieu process works?
So Commissioner Dodds, the in lieu process is the discussion item that's coming up on the next discussion item on our agenda tonight. We're doing an inclusionary housing ordinance update, and there's an option to pay an in lieu fee, and with respect to the requirement under inclusionary housing, there is no in lieu fee with respect to the density bonus project. Okay. They're two separate things. They do end up often satisfying, like a density bonus project can satisfy the inclusionary housing requirement by providing on-site affordable units, which is a mandate of density bonus law. And so in that case, they wouldn't be subject to the in lieu fee. That could be a way to satisfy the inclusionary housing requirement, which is part of our municipal code, not part of our zoning code, nor is it part of state law.
Okay. Then back to, the other question I had would be back to parking. And you kind of explained, you said that there are certain instances they may not have to be required to provide parking. Why is that?
Because Chairman Dodds, I think in the legislature's mind, and there's certain conditions that have to qualify you for that provision of state law. One of those provisions typically is that you're within a half mile of a major transit stop. Mm-hmm. And so the idea is that folks, perhaps in lower, a very low income category or an extremely low income category, may not have the means to which to have a car. They wouldn't expect their residents to own a vehicle. The public transit would serve as their means to get from point A to point B. So I believe the state believes that by incentivizing development, by reducing parking, because parking is often very expensive to provide, it's another incentive for the production of affordable housing units by the reduction of parking. due to reduction of parking.
That's what I expect. I thought that they were kind of expecting that. I guess my concern would be, especially for females. I mean, you're talking about a half mile walk in the dark. That can be kind of scary.
In certain instances, it could be. I don't disagree.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Commissioner Simons, go ahead.
Yeah, I did my best to go through the laws and, reconcile all the stuff to make sure it was good. But just part of the review process, did like the city attorney's office review this and sign off and say, hey, it's compliant, or are we the ones that are left to determine that?
No, Ms. Hamilton in my office, who's assigned to the Planning Commission, reviews the proposals and has determined it's compliant with state law.
Okay, great, thank you.
I have my other question. So that physical environment that refuses, a city to refuse an incentive based on the specified adverse impact on the physical environment, that would be like setbacks and all.
No, it's much stricter than that. So that's what gets back into, you may have heard this in past projects, the specific adverse impact test, which is a written, objective, quantifiable public health and safety standard. So an example, I guess, could be, if your project is in an airport approach zone and you have a height limit because of safety issues, that may be an example of a written public health and safety standard. But it's a much higher threshold than we're used to dealing with in years past.
Okay, so we couldn't reject something based on it being too high for an airport, based on this? Because it says we can't reject it because of physical environment.
No, I think it would have to meet the standards of a specific adverse impact. So if you have a written public health and safety standard that the city's adopted and the project violates that standard, then we would still have the authority to deny.
Oh, I see.
I was
Okay.
using the airport example not just because, the approach zone has a specific height requirement that applies because of public health and safety. So you could deny if it were violative of that.
Because when you said that, the extra 3 stories jumped into my head.
Right.
That you can add, which will be a lot in Oceanside, an additional 3 stories. I'm not crazy about all this.
Back on your comments, so that's existing standards and or future ones that come along.
Those have to be, generally speaking, standards that are in effect at the time the application is deemed complete.
Got it. Okay. Very good. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have my line.
Commissioner Obama, oh, there you go.
Again, this was a lot to understand and read, and you have to be an expert, I would think, to understand all of the percentages and when it applies. I was just going crazy trying to read all this. But one of my questions was answered. It was the adverse effects and what that is, the explanation of that and examples. Thank you very much, Mr. Mullins. The other one I was asking about was kind of like, first, I understand that a project needs to have 5 units or more to start this density bonus process, correct?
That's, Commissioner Obama, that's correct.
Okay.
So that would be considered a housing project under 6591.
5 or more. And then basically, it has a window of 55 years as far as being in existence, correct?
Commissioner Obama, that's correct. The law prescribes that there's a restrictive covenant recorded against the income restricted unit for a period of not less than 55 years.
Sorry, Richard. Yeah. And so then who manages that as far as as it goes through the length of years and people change jobs and everything? How does that it's recorded on their deed, I guess, right? And so the next guy that buys it, the next guy that buys it's going to have that on there. And then someone's going to make sure that after 55 years it goes away. I guess it's going to be logical and easy to figure out. But it's going to be the county that does that, the city that does that?
There should be an affordable housing regulatory agreement with the city's neighborhood services department.
Okay.
Recorded against the property, and there's a monitoring requirement that these owners of these units submit information to the city's housing department to make sure they're complying with the income restriction limits of the tenants that are occupying these units.
Okay, so it's watched pretty carefully. And a density bonus can really happen in any neighborhood that residential is allowed, correct?
That is correct.
because we saw it in Fire Mountain, which is a single-family neighborhood. We had Whaley Street. So any place that you want to put 5 units on a piece of ground, it has to be, what, 1 acre or larger? Is that what I kind of read? Or no, it can be smaller?
It can be. I think the 1 acre donation is a requirement for if you're going to satisfy density bonus with a donation of land.
Oh,
the
that's where I got
minimum
the
lot
1
is 1 acre, but
Okay.
a project does not have to be 1 acre to qualify for a density bonus project.
Okay. My last question was, I don't know if it's cobbled into something else. It's hard for me to find everything, but it was about, maybe it was in the waivers section, ordinance concessions and incentives. It lists the architectural design requirements. I remember we had kind of spoken a little bit, or maybe people were thinking about if there's a way that the city could put on some kind of architectural restrictions on these projects to make them more appealing. Is that something that we cannot continue to maybe pursue, like the city council that put on the idea of the short-term rentals? Is there a way we can do something like that with architectural design that maybe makes them a little bit more appealing?
Commissioner Obama, we could adopt objective design guidelines that all projects would be subject to, but the developer of a density bonus project always has the ability to request a concession from those design standards based on financial needs. Maybe it poses a increase in cost because of certain design guidelines, so they can ask for a concession from that requirement, and all they have to do is provide reasonable documentation that shows that by precluding those design guidelines, we're saving money on the project.
But in the case of, say, of the Mission District, it's already been recorded and is there, you still have to make it mission-like in design, correct?
In general, that's what the expectation would be, but I suppose they could ask for a concession from that
Really?
requirement.
And
Okay.
they also need to be objective. And there's been recent case law on this too. There can't be subjectivity in these design guidelines. It has to be basically plug in the math and do it, which isn't typically what you see in design guidelines.
Okay, that's, I probably have more digging around in this thing because there's so many, like, oh my gosh, what does this mean? I had a lot of those question marks, but I'll let somebody else ask another question.
We may give the floor right back to you, because I
there's
think
nobody else that has any.
the rest of the commissioners
couple of,
are
like,
out of questions at the moment.
Short-term, I got that. After 55 years, I did that, okay.
We can go to the public. I recognize there's nobody in the chambers, but this is a public hearing, so do we have any slips to speak?
No slips this evening, Chairman.
Okay. I'm trying to stall here for Commissioner Obama to find her questions.
It's okay. It just was trying to understand it better. Isn't that I had a question like it's like something's not correct. You guys have done a great job on this, and it's very extensive to try to get through it. So and mine was just mainly just education.
It is very thorough. Okay, we'll close the public hearing, seeing as we don't have any slips, and we'll bring it back to continued questions or comments. Commissioner Custer?
So I was just wondering, it says that the city shall ensure that initial occupants of a for-sale unit qualified by the density bonus are of the specified income requirements, the above existing condition now with equity sharing agreement. I'm not real clear on what that means. I mean, will it be based on just their income, which was what?
Are you looking at page 5?
Page 5,
At the
yes.
bottom there?
At the bottom of page 5.
Bill 728.
So Commissioner Custer, what that law mandates is that the initial occupant for a for-sale product qualify for the income level on which the unit is being reserved.
So it's just income is the only basis?
That's correct.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
what
So
I was
as an
wondering.
example, if a project invokes the, a percentage of the project units for the very low income, then the state produces guidelines on what those income limits are based on area median income, and then based on the area median income and the percentage of your income available for paying for housing there's a formula by which the maximum sale price is set.
Right.
It all depends on the income level for which the units are being reserved.
Okay. I was wondering if there were other qualifications, but it's solely income.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Commissioner Baba?
I found another one of my question marks. It's under the concessions and incentives section again, and it's basically talking a little bit about buildings that are California registered of historical resources and how possibly, like just because I don't want to try to explain what I'm thinking it says, but basically, if you have an historic building, what happens with the density bonus project? Can it be just raised and something happen there, or what? Like, how does that work with a historical building?
Sure, Commissioner Balma. So that is one of the reasons if the proposed incentive or concession or even a waiver of a development standard, if they're found to have an impact on a registered historic resource, then those are reasons for which either an incentive or concession or a waiver can be denied by the city. If there's the requested waiver, or concession, or incentive would have an impact, a significant adverse impact on the registered historic resource. Okay. So, as an example, tearing down a registered historic resource would preclude someone
Okay.
from qualifying from a density bonus project.
When you say could, it could still be.
We'd have to
It'd have to be
understand.
case by case.
Yeah.
Okay, so like St. Mary's Church down the street, if someone wanted to build a
10-story building.
10-story building there, and it was part of a conglomeration of property that was going to be a bigger picture than just that where that church sits, which is historic.
It wouldn't necessarily, Commissioner Bond, wouldn't necessarily have to be the raising of the church. It could be a development on adjacent property to it. But if those requested concessions, incentives, or waivers would have an impact on that historic resource, then that could be grounds for which to deny that requested waiver, concession, or incentive.
Okay, great, thank you.
Good questions, thank you. Okay, any other comments, questions by commissioners? Don't see
I
any.
do have one more.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
It is very interesting, all these different things. Well, actually, it'll probably be two more. Okay, so on page 6, it says that requests for reduced parking ratios, this is the second bullet point. Reduced parking ratios are not counted towards the total number of incentives. So if a person was getting 4 incentives, they would still get 4 plus reduced parking. Is that correct?
Commissioner Custer, that's correct.
Okay. And so my last question, I think, is that when we vote tonight, are we voting that we approve of these things? Because my understanding is we have no choice on that. Or are we just voting that, yes, these things will be incorporated into our guidelines?
So, Commissioner Custer, tonight you're being asked to make a recommendation to City Council on the revised ordinance as presented tonight. Regardless if the city were to adopt this ordinance or not, we'd still be subject to the requirements outlined in the Government Code Section 65915, whether we have an updated ordinance or not. We've recently processed a host of density bonus projects where we had an inconsistent local density bonus ordinance. We're still held to the requirements and provisions of the current state law. So tonight, we're asking you to consider our updated local ordinance and find it to be consistent with state law, making a recommendation to City Council.
So we're not saying that we love these things. We're saying that we accept the fact we have to put them in.
Generally, that's correct, yes.
Correct, okay.
Very well put.
Yeah.
I think you might be ready to tee up a motion with that.
Oh, well.
I'm asking.
Except I don't like any of these things.
Yeah,
But
well.
we're saying that we have to put them in, so,
Yeah.
and not that we like them, so I can do that motion. I'll make a motion that we confirm issuance of a notice of exemption per the California Environmental Quality Act, Article 5, Section 15061B3, under the common sense exemption that CEQA applies only to projects which have the potential for causing a significant effect on the property, and adopt Planning Commission Resolution Number 2022 P20, recommending approval of Zone Amendment ZA 22-0001 and Local Coastal Program Amendment LCPA 22-0001 with findings of approval attached herein.
Right. I would offer a second without love.
So we have a motion by Commissioner Custer to approve the recommended action, and then second by Commissioner Obama. Any further discussions before we vote? Don't see any, so please vote.
Chair Rosales, let the record show that the motion passes 5-0.
Great, thank you. As noted earlier, we are continuing the other public hearing item number 5 until July 25th. So moving along the agenda, I don't see anything listed under the city planner's determination appeals. So we'll go to discussion items. We do have one item, and that's an update on proposed revisions to Chapter 14C, which is the inclusionary housing, which is part of the Oceanside Municipal Code. We have a presentation by staff, followed by public comments and discussion.
Apologize, it's taking me a while to get up here. Presentation going. So tonight's the first night I'm meeting you all. I'm Leilani Hines, and I am the Director of Housing and Neighborhood Services. I'm new to y'all from about a year now in place, coming to you from the city of Chula Vista down south for over 25 years and have over 30 plus years in the housing arena, whether it's development, housing policy, and housing elements. So just a little bit of background for you all since I'm meeting you today for the first time. I've been leading up the team that has been working on our inclusionary housing ordinance and the updates that City Council has requested probably a couple of years ago. And so now we're here to kind of present you where we are. I don't believe anything is quite as earth-shattering, I think, as some of the state law related to density bonus, and you'll see how they start to really try to work together and mirror each other. So with that, our inclusionary housing program really requires that 10% of all new residential construction projects come in with affordable housing component, either low or even moderate income. That would satisfy the requirement. Very much in line with what you're seeing under state density bonus law. And as an alternative to that, developers don't have to necessarily build the housing in place or in the ground, but they can pay the alternative, which is the in lieu fee. And I think before you saw changes in state law, we were having most of our developers pay the in lieu fee. Density bonus has changed that quite a bit, and so now you're starting to see more projects that are being incentivized, if you will, to build units on the ground or within their projects. So when we started out on this journey of really looking at the inclusionary housing program and what the goals were, we kind of established what our benchmarks or what we wanted to try to achieve. And one of which, as you've seen through the housing element, is that we've got a big RENA number. Everybody's got a big RENA number. For Oceanside, it's about almost 2,000 new housing units for lower income households, 883 of those units for moderate income. We also heard, and I think this was a little bit of the impetus at the council level, was how do you provide that flexibility for the development industry, who really is the ones who are out there building the housing, to encourage them to build and not just pay. And so what we heard from the development community is that what you always hear is we want a level of certainty. We want some predictability in the process. And then we want some flexibility. Let us do what we do best, which is build housing. And then from council, again, the encouragement of on-site construction of housing then with all the myriad of state housing laws that you're seeing come forward, just how do we comply with those with the state laws, whether it's density bonus or the requirement that we need to offer alternatives. If we're going to do inclusionary housing, it can't just be a one straight path. It's got to have some ways in which developers can have some alternatives to do affordable housing. And then we also wanted to look at what are other cities doing? Do we want to be the ones that are out there in the forefront, pushing the way towards affordable housing, or do we want to kind of be consistent with what we're seeing around there so that all the developers know the name of the game and they're all from one city to another city, building affordable housing in much the same way, and the expectations are pretty much the same. That's a little bit of this certainty and predictability. So those were the goals that we started out with in terms of looking at the ordinance and what could be some possible revisions. After talking with our stakeholder group, which was basically residential developers and others in the industry, Apartment Association, the BIA, affordable housing developers, and then just our market rate developers, and then as well some consultants. We did have a meeting with those folks and talked about the ordinance and what could be changed, what they saw as barriers, what could be incentivize them to build affordable housing. After all those discussions, staff recommended that much of the ordinance really stay the same, that we do not do too much to change the ordinance, still applying to 3 units or more, requiring the 10% of new rental units for low income, and then 10% for for sale units for low or moderate income. I will say that at one point in time in 2021, when we first started this with the consultant, there was talk about changing that 10% for low or moderate to just straight across low income and just do boilerplate across the board, whether you're rental or for sale, 10% for low income. Today we stand July 2022 with headlines that say housing in San Diego County is at a median of $1 million. So with $1 million as your median home, we rethought that 10% for low income and said, you know what, there's still a place for middle income. Our middle income or moderate income home buyers, they can't find anything out there, and they're out there competing with our low income residents for rental housing. So there's still a place for moderate income, and so what we're presenting to you now is to keep the 10% for low income at the rental product, and then 10% for either low or moderate at the for sale product. And then keeping in line, affordable for 55 years. That's something that's required under density bonus law. The 55 years is also consistent with any of the affordable housing financing programs, whether that's tax credit or multifamily housing bond financing. So 55 years is pretty much the standard when it comes to affordable housing, so keeping that in place. So oftentimes we get asked, who are our low income? Who are our moderate income? What does that really mean? We talk affordable all the time. It's not what you think it is. A lot of folks think that it's really folks on welfare, and it can be. But for very low income, that's a family of 4 making $65,000 a year. It's pretty much any household that's making minimum wage. Our low income is at $104,000 a year. That's what's deemed by the state under their definitions of what is affordable or low income by the state or federal government. So $104,000. There's a lot of entry-level police, a lot of entry-level city workers, a lot of entry-level health workers that are low income, because that's a pretty high number, higher than what most folks think of as low income. And then moderate is at $128,000 a year. So in terms of our proposed revisions, we are looking at changing some of the definitions of affordable rent and sales prices. Again, consistency with state law, the density bonus program particularly. And then there was a piece of the law or inclusionary housing that came to be interpreted as this like for like, meaning that you come in with a single family residential project, single family detached, you make 10% of those single-family detached products as low income. That's probably been the biggest barrier that I think that the residential community will tell you that's made it difficult to produce affordable housing. Typically, affordable housing is done in a more multifamily product, whether that's for sale condos or townhomes or rental products, but not typically in a single family detached. So looking at loosening that up a little bit in terms of the product type, but also still saying, hey, it's got to be somewhat compatible in appearance. It's got to look good. Got to get quality construction, quality looking products, so that no one can go down the street and say, hey, that project's the low income folks. That's where they live. So that there's no distinction, that there's a blending of the product with the surrounding neighborhoods. So we don't want to change that, we want to boost that, but we want the ability in terms of product type to make financial sense and financial viability so we can get the units on the ground and house the most vulnerable of our population. So here are some of your rent income limits. When we talk affordable housing, what does that mean? For a low-income family in a 2-bedroom unit, under state law, that means that you're paying $1,400 a month in rent. Not a lot of product right now today that meets that qualifier. For moderate income, it's a little generous, and sometimes folks say, depending on the market, moderate is market. And in some places, maybe like in National City, or some of our other communities, $3,000 moderate is market. In Oceanside, I'm hard pressed to say that $3,000 may be moderate. It may not be a market. Right now, we're looking at rents that are more around the $2,400 mark in the rental market. So moderate is a little bit above that. So this just goes to show a little bit of what the rent restrictions would be for any project coming in, whether it's inclusionary or density bonus, what they'd have to make available for 55 years to a low-income household. And then every year HUD comes up with new rent rates or a new median income, and it's adjusted accordingly. So in terms of proposed revisions, it's really about offering folks, and again, in compliance with state law that says we need to provide alternatives. We've got a lot of alternatives in the ordinance already. What's outlined before you here, what's underlined is where we would change it, just tweak it a bit. We already allow for off-site with findings that the on-site is infeasible from a financial standpoint. It just doesn't make sense. But we're also saying that, hey, not only does it not to financially make sense, but the alternative you're proposing could be so much more beneficial than what you would give us, either deeper affordability targets, more units, that the city's getting a little bit more to meet its affordable housing needs and demands from the community. We already offer developers the ability to acquire and rehab market and make those affordable. We already allow the purchase of credits in another development. We're looking at rental units instead of doing a home ownership project. What we're adding to the mix is to preserve existing and affordable housing units. Back in the 80s, 90s, we had a lot of affordable housing development built. We had a lot of affordable housing built in the 2000s. So making sure that those units that might be a little bit older but are expiring, their covenants are expiring, because back in the day we used to only do 20 years of affordability, or maybe 30 years, nowhere near 55 years that we have today. But so instead of allowing those projects to turn into market rate products and thereby evicting somewhat residents who can no longer afford market and having them out on the street, we're saying, hey, you can pick up an existing affordable housing development and keep it affordable so that those families aren't displaced and they can continue to live in the community they've been living in for years and still at a reasonable rate. And then lastly, to provide special needs housing units. You hear a lot of talk about homelessness and what are we going to do to solve the homeless crisis? Or you may hear about disabled populations or other population groups that are much more economically vulnerable. This allows for our developers to choose an option like that, maybe doing a shelter, some transitional housing for homeless folks, or disabled folks, but just doing something a little bit different to get at a different need that we might have here in Oceanside. And the more important proposed revision, and I think what council really asked us to do, was this increase or an update to the in lieu fee. The study that you have included in your packet, our consultant came up with a range of anywhere from $35 to $45 a square foot. That's a lot of money for our developers, tacked on to all the other impact fees or building permit fees that they might have to pay. So what we are proposing as staff, well, the consultant proposed, well, maybe not 35, 45, but 25. When they looked across the board, because other cities are using $25 a square foot as their marker for in lieu fee. The city of San Diego uses $25. City of Encinitas has a $25 fee. So the consultant said $25 is probably a good in lieu fee. As staff, as we looked at what was going on and hearing from our residential industry, seeing Carlsbad take on the in lieu fee at $15 a square foot, staff is recommending a $15 square foot. That's still double what our developers are paying today. So it is a significant increase from them. During the input process, when we met with our stakeholders and during the Housing Commission meeting, the BIA did say, hey, $15, we can live with $15, but hey, can you spread that over a 3-year period? Very similar to what the City of San Diego and the Housing Commission are doing. They are doing a 3-year phase-in of their in lieu fee and a 3-year phase-in of their inclusionary housing requirements that are upping both sides of that. So that is something that the Housing Commission heard, that the BIA put forward, and the Housing Commission actually said, can we split the baby on this one? Consultant said $25, you said $15, how about $20? So that's a little bit of the input that came from the Housing Commission and from the residential community, really more on the in lieu fee and what would be palatable to all parties in order to get developers to pay that fee, and in order for your housing staff to be able to get some money out there to do good projects and to be able to fund things and get some units on the ground. So our timeline for update, this June and early July, we've been going out and speaking to folks. We did go to the Housing Commission. We did meet with our residential stakeholder group. We met or presented at the Safe Routes for Healthy Places. We talked during the John Landis Resource Fair. We've made ourselves available to a whole host of social service providers and other advocates who work on behalf of our lower income community, making ourselves available to talk about that inclusionary, making them aware of what we're proposing. So we've done a lot of talking to folks. Thus far, I think we included in your packet what we've heard thus far. We hope that we will be coming back to the Housing Commission with actually a KOCT ordinance with all the revisions, kind of the big picture that we're talking about, but in writing and in a proposed ordinance, and then back to you on September 12th. The purpose of tonight is to hear a little bit of your feedback of where you're coming from, what your ideas are. Do they stray from what we're proposing as staff, from the hearing what the consultant put forward, and then hearing a little bit about what some of the public has been saying about the proposed revisions. And then hope to be to City Council for final adoption of an ordinance on October 5th. So that's kind of lays out the timeline of what we're shooting for and how we hope to get the proposed revisions on the books and able to implement. So with that, I'll close my presentation. I am always available to contact either through email or by telephone to have a conversation about inclusionary and what we're doing. With the ordinance, as well as any kind of affordable housing questions. So that concludes staff's presentation. We are available to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hines. I had one question about the in lieu of fee, given that you said it went back and forth and you compared what's being proposed here with other cities. If it was found that $15 was, if, say that goes forward and it becomes the new fee, and that becomes palatable to the developers, Is it administratively at some point easier to build in kind of an escalator over time as opposed to coming back and revising the entire ordinance?
Absolutely. Part of the proposal is to build in that escalator, so we're not having to do an economic study every single time. So the escalator, I think, is consistent with what other cities do, and what you see on a lot of fees, the escalators based on the consumer price index.
Great, okay. Any other questions for staff, Ms. Hines? Go ahead, Commissioner Simons.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for the presentation. My first time looking at this program and hearing about it, so I appreciate the information. Is this a mandatory program? So if I'm a developer and I'm going to build something, I'm subject to this ordinance when it comes out?
You sure are, and that's the way it is for most jurisdictions. I think what you're seeing, and as you've heard through the RENA process, through the housing element process, these big numbers that we're talking about from the state from a production standpoint. So inclusionary housing is looked across the state as kind of a toolbox that we as cities have to offer. And so you're seeing more jurisdictions adopt inclusionary housing or revisiting it. For example, the city of Vista did away with inclusionary housing, but they're looking to bring it back up. The County of San Diego, by the end of the fall, will be looking at an ordinance to implement inclusionary. So I think as you have these big numbers for RENA, it is really seen as the tool to get units on the ground, and therefore becoming more and more mandatory across the state.
So it's an optional program for the city to adopt an ordinance, but the goals
Yes.
are not optional. Correct.
Exactly.
So the goals can be reached through the density bonus laws that are already in the books from the state.
Yes.
Now, how do we keep track of affordable housing that is coming online, meeting the goals from the density bonus program, which is not optional? And then, so if I'm a developer and I come in and I don't want to do, I don't really want to do a affordable housing project. It just doesn't fit where I'm building, doing whatever I'm doing. But the city has met the affordable housing goals. Why are we subjecting them to this? You're getting them coming or going one way or the other. The idea would be to incentivize through these programs, see if we're meeting the goals. As I see the goals that are on here, what's the timeline to meet these goals? Is it a 5-year window, a 1-year window?
Serena is an 8-year goal, and when we bring forward from housing staff or housing and neighborhood services, what you'll see when we bring forward an affordable housing project, or we will actually do a housing impact analysis in that report. We'll report out what the RENA goals are and how that project particularly meets the RENA goals. We also do that on an annual basis. We're required to by law in what we call the annual performance report, where we're reporting on progress of the city of Oceanside towards the housing element and all the various programs that it has before it. So we do that accounting of how projects are meeting, but quite honestly, that low-income goal is a really difficult one to meet. There aren't a lot of jurisdictions that meet that goal. You saw in the last cycle, some cities were able to meet that goal because they had 23 units, and they might have done them through all ADUs. But to meet a 1,900 production number is pretty darn difficult to do. We had Greenbrier Village, which was an affordable housing complex, a permanent supportive housing project that came forward last year. It's probably been 3 or 4 years since we saw a project of that scale come forward, and that was only 60 units. 60 units is a drop in the bucket to nearly 2,000 units.
When does the 8-year window expire?
2029.
How far are we towards meeting this goal currently?
Commissioner Simon, so the city recently adopted an updated housing element for the next housing cycle, which will carry us through 2029. We're still waiting for certification from the state. So we're just embarking on meeting those new RENA numbers. And historically, our city has not met our RENA numbers in any of the income categories, whether only the market rate category. So it's something that all cities lack behind in the production of affordable housing, especially.
Well, isn't that why the state pass all these new laws, and we just heard this presentation before. So we have two separate programs trying to achieve the same goal, but in the interim, we're going to extract an in lieu fee out of developers and then raise the price. And that's my concern, is that we adopt an ordinance that extracts a funding stream, which once cities and municipalities get addicted to a funding stream that's an in lieu fee, that fee, if we escalate it, automatically becomes something that is onerous, and it just happens a lot in the environmental world, that the in lieu fee is a very slippery slope, especially when we have programs already in place that are trying to address these things, and we don't take the time to assess the impact of those programs before we throw this ordinance out.
So let me try to address that. So one of the things and why you see that we're not proposing a lot of revisions to the inclusionary is, I think we all understand from a staff and a developer standpoint, the way our current inclusionary housing requirements are, they work hand in hand with density bonus. So if you're coming in here to build a residential development under inclusionary, you slide right into density bonus because the requirements are pretty consistent. So they kind of go hand in hand. And by taking part in density bonus, you are in fact satisfying inclusionary. So either way you slice it, whether you're coming in as density bonus, you're coming in inclusionary, we count those units as one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'm not debating the unity of purpose when somebody is coming in with a density bonus program. It's the other way that is the concern. If I choose not to do a density bonus, you are going to penalize me by hitting me with this escalatory in lieu fee when the whole point of the density bonus program and all these state laws that we have no ability to affect, those are mandatory. This is not. So that's just kind of what I'm getting at. So from an approval process, obviously this goes to the city council. I saw on your timeline, there was a hearing for the planning commission where there's a vote by the planning commission, but does the vote, how does the vote carry? Is that if it doesn't pass the planning commission, then what?
So you are your advisory body, both the Housing Commission and the Planning Commission are advisory bodies to the City Council. So you may vote not to move this forward, and we would take your recommendation to City Council, and ultimately City Council is the final legislative body, so they will make a determination based upon all the input, whether from Housing Commission, Planning Commission, or the public that may come in and speak and address the updates that we're bringing forward.
Okay. Final question, where does the in lieu fee go?
So the in lieu fee goes into the housing fund. We use that fund to fund a number of projects. For example, the latest have been the Greenbrier Village Apartments, which is a permanent supportive housing development for extremely low or at 30% AMI, as well as some persons who may be homeless. We're using the Inclusionary Housing Fund to also fund the Low Barrier Navigation Center for the homeless. So we turn those funds around and put them into projects. I don't think we've seen a lot since density bonuses has come into effect and the generous kinds of waivers and concessions that are offered by the state. We haven't had a lot of projects pay the in lieu fee. Most of them have been going towards the density bonus route. There are a few projects, some of the smaller scale ones that are coming forward where it may be just easy to do the in lieu fee of $8 a square foot. But for the most part, you have been seeing a lot of the residential development coming forward under density bonus and building units versus paying a fee.
We are using this, who's we?
You, as the Planning Commission, have seen a few projects.
You said we turn these in lieu fees into projects, blah, blah, blah. Who is we?
The we is the city, yes. The City Council has jurisdiction over the financial assistance and how those dollars get spent. So as staff, Housing Department may bring forward a project for financial assistance. The City Council reviews those proposals and determines whether or not we're getting what we need out of deploying those funds. They'll execute agreement and provide that assistance to a developer. But it's city council that has the discretion as to how those funds are used.
Thank you.
Can I just jump in and add one point? And that is I think it's important to note, there is an existing in lieu fee in our ordinance in 14C7, and that is subject to an automatic adjustment every year based on the formula that's established. We modified that. We had the city council many years ago modified the in lieu fee and changed it from a per unit fee, I think it was around $10,000 a unit, to a square footage fee. And then had a formula for an automatic adjustment every July 1. And I suspect if you plugged in the factors in that ordinance, it would be substantially more than $15 a square foot. I'm not sure if that has been looked at yet, but so I just wanted to make it clear, there already is an escalatory provision in the existing ordinance as well.
There's an existing ordinance for
For the in lieu fee.
for inclusionary housing?
Yep.
Yep.
So there already is an ordinance? So you're just updating this
I think
ordinance?
one of the genesis of this amendment was a council direction a year or two ago
Yeah.
to look at providing additional options for developers to be able to comply. For example, there is a provision in our inclusionary housing ordinance that Leilani mentioned that essentially says that if you're going to build the unit on site, it has to be effectively the same as the market rate unit. And so many on council felt that that was an impediment for developers to choose an on-site construction option because they'd have to build a unit that's exactly the same as the market rate unit. So they wanted to free up the ability to have perhaps a multifamily unit as the on-site unit instead of a single-family unit. And so I think that is where these discussions originated that are eventually coming to you for consideration later this year.
All right, I'll definitely do some more research on this before you come back, so I know where it was and where we're going. Thank you.
Commissioner Bala?
Thank you, Leilani. That was a great presentation, and welcome to the city. You're definitely in there. I just wanted to ask one under the proposed revisions. You have it, I know you kind of you just mentioned it, preserve existing affordable housing units. When one of these now turns into, they can go market rate, how do you get them to stay with low-income housing?
That's a tough one in this market because, as all of you probably know, acquiring these products can be quite pricey. So it really is a game of, how much money do you have and what can you offer me? And is your price better than Joe Smith next door who's going to offer me $50 million to acquire? So that's really all we can do, is to offer the financial incentive and allowing developers, if they can strike up a deal with a property owner to acquire the property, then to acquire it and then put those affordability covenants on it so that for the long haul, those would be reserved for affordable. But really, we play in the same game as any other residential developer, and we're out there in the market working against and coming up against other market rate developers and investors. So that's a tough one.
Would that
It's
be
an option, but
would
it's
that be an
hard.
option for in lieu fees to actually help purchase something?
Absolutely. So the same types of options we would provide our development community to meet affordable housing are the very same types of options we would look at to expending those in lieu fee dollars that we have available to us.
That kind of makes it a little bit more valuable to have those still kind of in play. And you're questioning the fact of why. That's another good reason to still continue on and even to raise them a little bit as you guys have proposed. So I can see the value.
Yeah, good comment. Commissioner Dodds?
Yes, I do have a question with your proposed revision. I understand where you're not requiring the like-for-like, but your sub-bullets they're kind of subjective. So how do you control those? Comparable in appearance is kind of a subjective requirement.
Yeah. And a little bit of what you all discussed earlier, right, related to density bonus, that it is quite subjective. So it really is a staffing recommendation. There's no hard and fast rule. I think that if we put a product out there in terms of affordable housing and we're all looking at it. I'm sure that there would be a hand raised to say, hey, that doesn't meet Oceanside standards. That's not what we see in the market rate development that's coming forward. But there's no hard and fast rule of like who gets to decide and does it hit this line or check this box in order to be deemed comparable or high quality. It is really a subjective matter.
Didn't the city of San Diego have a project? It was a high-rise building where I think that the public got involved, and they pretty much had two different entrances to this complex. One was for the low-income housing, one was for the whatever market rate, but they made them change all that so that the entrance was the same.
Yeah, so so you've got a lot of different state laws playing into the mix, right? You want to have some bar so that people don't say this is the low income project, this is public housing, the old public housing model, so that it looks the same, no one can point to it and be discriminatory. There's also fair housing laws, and those fair housing laws have gotten more and more stringent. So ensuring like that, a separate entrance for affordable, a separate entrance, that wouldn't fly under fair housing laws, and you could say that in some way is discriminatory or disparate treatment amongst different groups, economic groups. So developers are very astute and they're very well aware of those laws, and the punishments or the remedies to violating fair housing laws are being challenged. There's some liability to that. So I think that when they do develop these projects, they're very wary of that. Most developers, they don't want to fight an upstream battle, and if there's a better way of doing things, and if they can accommodate public comments, neighborhood concerns, they will, until it starts to hit that bottom line. So there's no assurances. This is all kind of sometimes a negotiation game between developers, community, and staff to get to a product that, not only satisfies the economics of affordable housing, but that will be a good project for Oceanside, a good neighbor in the community, and hopefully a win-win for everybody.
I do have another question concerning your proposed revisions. You have another bullet that says preserving existing affordable housing units. And I know some of these units are built back in the 90s and 80s, so we're pushing 30, 40 years. So I know we want to keep them at low housing and not have them transition over. But is there a plan to do any revisions to up for, how do we word that, improvements? I mean, because
Sure.
a 40-year-old unit is a 40-year-old unit.
It sure is. So not only do we want to protect residents from being displaced, we want to preserve that affordable housing in terms of the rent that they're paying, but also to preserve the unit and structure itself. So typically in the affordable housing arena, when a developer looks to preserve an existing affordable housing development, in our world, they go after what we call tax credits and bond financing. There are requirements under both financing mechanisms that you deploy at least a certain percentage of your costs towards improvement and rehab. So we typically call them, they're not only acquisition projects, but they're AC rehab projects. They're acquisition with rehab happening at the same time. So there is a standard within those financing mechanisms that require that you do a certain level of rehab, because we are trying to preserve a unit. It's already been preserved for, say, 30, 40 years. We're saying you got to preserve them for another 55 years. Well, during that 55 years, we sure don't want that roof to cave in. We sure don't want, railings and stairs to deteriorate. So there are requirements when you go that route under affordable housing to preserve the structure itself.
Okay, that's why I know, so we're talking structure, but what about for each unit? I mean, so for 30 years, over a period of time, you have different families that move in and out of there. You'll have different problems. You could have molds. There are a lot of other things. So is there any process in place where we actually do improvements to the units themselves?
Yes, so it's an overall, the buildings themselves and the structures and the units themselves, both under tax credit and bond financing, they do require reserves to be held at a certain level for capital improvements. There's a there's a plan for how you deploy and turn over units and bring them up to standard. Some of our families may live there 10, 20 years because it's so darn cheap, right? And so after the unit is turned over, there's a required plan to rehab the unit and get new appliances, new flooring, and upkeep to maintain that level of the 55-year covenant and to ensure that people are still living not only in affordable units, but healthy units, safe units. So health and safety concerns still rise to the top as well.
Okay, so the turnover portion, that's, I won't say easy, but it's easier to actually implement. But what about, like you said, the family that's been there 10, 15, 20 years? 10, 15, 20 years with not having your pipes inspected or improved or looking for molds or rebuild or even changing the appliances. Is there a process for people who don't transition out of those units?
Sure, and again, that is part of the plan in terms of the upkeep and maintenance. And it may not just occur at turnover, it may occur at a certain time frame, or even, just in market rate projects as well. You have a rental product there that's not restricted and it's just on the market. Those residents also have an ability to go under, civil law and what their lease agreement says and say, I need to be insured a safe and habitable home. And I can use the civil process to get those deployed. Or if it's greater than that and it's a health and safety concern, then we're talking about the ability to call code enforcement or anyone else to remedy the situation and to get the unit back into a habitable space. So whether it's through the civil process, whether it's affordable or market rate, there are processes in place to ensure that units, again, are safe and habitable.
Okay.
I don't think I have a question at the moment that hasn't been addressed.
Great, thank you. Thank you for your comments, and thank you, Leilani, for the presentations.
No problem, and happy
Very-
to meet you all.
Yeah.
Likewise, very interesting. So we're looking for a particular action on this. It's actually a question. I think you're looking for us to recommend this get pushed forward to the city council at this point, or?
Not necessarily. I
Okay.
think what we're here to
Just
hear
get our
is some
input.
of your questions and your comments. If there are parts that you want us to explore more or you don't agree with, we'd like to hear that. Just as the Housing Commission said, hey, we think $15 is too low. Can we try for 20? Those are the kinds of comments that we're looking for from you. Or you can say, hey, you know what? We think this is the route to go, or do we need to switch, change direction, or keep on going down this path? What we would hate to do is to come back here in August or September with an ordinance where you said, you missed the mark, Leilani. You should have done it this way, and you should have gone this path of travel. So if there are any bigger picture or bigger items, some intricacies that you'd like us to explore, you think that we're just way off the mark, we're happy to hear those comments today. And again, as I said, we're always open to hearing comments from you all. You may be contacting me by phone or email as an individual Oceanside resident that says, hey, Leilani, this is my comment for you. Maybe not as a planning commissioner, but this is my comment for you. So we're looking to hear it as a body from the planning commission, or at any point in time from you as individuals and representatives of the city of Oceanside as a resident. So just open to comments, questions.
Great, thank you. Anybody would like to provide anything formal at this point, or a different direction on what's been presented?
I just thought our city attorney, when he brought up the idea of what the actual, the increases would have been if you wouldn't have if you just would have followed what the logic was before, it would be interesting to see where that falls. like maybe it's, like you said, you might be even more than $20, but just to see where that actually is and how that was put in place, and just to kind of use it as a ballpark when you're trying to come up with a figure.
Sure, we
Thought
can
that was
bring
a
that
good
back
point.
forward to you as part of our analysis of why we're
Just an
going.
analysis of like the rationale to go to 15 or to go to 20. And I like the idea of what the BIA said as far as phasing goes. That's probably a logical way for a guy in business to actually pallet that. But I thought that was interesting how there might be something already in place that might have actually increased it past, we don't know.
Well, I just remember many years ago when we went to a square footage fee, the BIA was pushing us to do that, so we did do that. There were a lot of folks who were against that, but there was this escalator built in, which my concern at the time is that's going to get to a fee that's unsustainable. And I know prior to Leilani joining us, when Michelle Skaggs Lawrence was the city manager, she and I were very concerned that if you just plug in the numbers, the fee is going to get to a very high number pretty quickly. So.
Although I think there would probably be an opportunity down the road if we get in that scenario where we've gotten to a level where it is too high, and then we cap it or we stop at that point, I would imagine, because this will come back as an ordinance revision.
Absolutely,
again
yes.
and again.
Yeah. So the escalator we're using or we're proposing is a CPI index. That is the way that most cities use the escalators, is based on CPI. The current formula we have is kind of a complicated one, and it is, I believe it's based on market rate sales prices. So you can only imagine if we're talking, when we were talking about 200,000 as the median, and now we're talking about $1 million, how $1 million median income may influence what the in lieu fee turns out to be. So that would probably be the factor where, wow, it could get to be unsustainable, where the CPI does reflect, and so some of you might be seeing right now, like in 2022, the CPI, I think, has ranged around the 8% mark, where in previous years it was more the 2%, maybe 3%. We just did our increase for mobile homes at 3.9%. So that's still a high figure, but the formula currently today bases itself on median priced housing.
Right.
The only additional comment I would have is, since we've got these density bonus projects, and now we have this where there's an ordinance that's currently in place, I would like to see every time one of these projects or a project comes up, I want to see where we are in the affordable housing goal. Because, and the other thing too is, if the city meets its goal, are we still going to charge people an in lieu fee? That doesn't.
Yeah, that's a
there should be
consideration.
if we're gonna also propose some kind of escalation that happens automatically, we should also have a turnoff. If we meet the goal, the in lieu fee goes away.
Okay.
So those
So like
are,
a sunset clause, if you hit this mark.
yeah. So if
it
the
sunsets.
state's laws that incentivize this type of development naturally achieve its goals, we should not be charging people an in lieu fee. And that's just kind of my concern. And I'd like to see where we are as these projects come up in front of us. Like, part of the brief is, hey, here's where we're at. So many of so many.
So Commissioner Simons, maybe it's important to clarify, an in lieu fee is just an option that a developer has in satisfying the inclusionary housing requirement. They could, as an example, choose to provide the unit on site, and they wouldn't have to pay the inclusionary or the in lieu fee. So in lieu fee is an option. Typically, it's been the easier option by which to satisfy the inclusionary housing requirement.
I understand how the in lieu fees work, and I understand how they get out of control too, because I see it constantly in the environmental side. So that's my concern with, especially with, it's no surprise that the very department that gets to spend the money is pushing, they're all for it and they're pushing for the higher fee. That's the problem. That's my concern. I mean,
Yeah,
I know this is
sure.
not
I hear
something
that.
for us to debate now.
And you'll see some state laws that are being passed that have sunset clause, because the idea is that, yeah, we're in an affordable housing crisis now. Does that mean we're in an affordable housing crisis 10 years from now or 5 years from now? And so some of the state law you see coming before you actually does have sunset clauses. So what I think I'm hearing from you is that it's not just about the in lieu fee, it's the whole idea of taxing the residential community to either build affordable housing put in an in lieu fee that if we've met the mark, do we really still need this tool in place? And if we don't need the tool, why do we have it?
Yeah, exactly. And it's just a measure for us to track the progress. As the people who approve the projects as they come through, just knowing where we are in this affordable housing continuum of like, hey, this is our goal, and this goal comes due on this date, where are we in this? It just helps us in our calculus as we review and consider projects. That's all.
That makes sense to me. I agree. We should have that information.
Good, very good comments, thank you. Leilani, I think we may be done up here,
Thank
but
you
we
very
look
much.
forward to
Enjoyed
seeing
my
you
evening
again.
with you. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, that's our only discussion item tonight, so we'll go to commissioner reports. I really don't have anything to add to tonight's discussion, no report or anything. Vice Chair Morrissey's out this evening, so Commissioner Bama,
I have nothing to report.
Commissioner Custer,
Nothing to report.
Commissioner Dodds,
Nothing to report.
and Commissioner Simons.
Nothing to report.
It's a clean sweep tonight, nothing to report, but city planner, we're not going to let you off the hook. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Rosales. Just to apprise you of some upcoming items that you'll be seeing. On July 25th, the Ocean Camp project will be before this body. We just today got the final approval necessary to move the project forward, so we'll be bringing that to you on the 25th. The project that was continued from tonight, the Tierra Norte project, will also be on that agenda, as well as a new single-family home at 74 St. Malo. And then going out to the August 8th meeting, there's a project known as The Breeze, which this body has seen before, a much smaller project. It was approved at a 38-unit townhome project. They're coming back with a 149-unit apartment project at that same site. And then you'll also see a new single-family residence at 1305 South Pacific Street. Moving out to City Council, on August 10th, we have scheduled a GPU alternatives report that this body saw back in May. They'll also be considering revisions to the density bonus ordinance that you heard tonight, and also a proposed zoning ordinance amendment for reinstalling a density cap in the downtown district. And then moving out to August 24th, City Council meeting, there will be a climate action plan progress report presented to the City Council, as well as the home occupation ordinance that this body considered back in March. And finally, this Wednesday on July 13th, between 5:30 and 7:30, there is a community forum on farmland conservation strategies that's going to be presented at the El Corazon Senior Center. Really, the purpose of this effort is to implement a climate action plan measure that obligates the city to find and put under conservation easement 50 acres out in South Moore Hills. So that's it for the city planner report.
Thank you. And Russ Cunningham is doing that Wednesday night?
He is, yes. Russ will be leading that forum.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, I think we're done for this evening. Thank you. We're adjourned.